Today on CG Off-Road, we're going to take full advantage of the Fabtech 6-inch lift on our 2017 Silverado and make it perform even better off-road. We just installed a Fabtech 6-inch lift on our 2017 Silverado. Now it only makes sense to install their Uniball upper control arms to take full advantage of it. These control arms are going to replace the factory upper control arms with heavy-duty 1.5-inch chromoly tubular arms, which are significantly stronger than the factory arms, with a stainless steel Uniball bearing for increased suspension travel and durability. They're going to allow us to take full advantage of our 6-inch lift, so today we're going to install them on our 2017 Silverado. Tools you'll need for this installation: a lift or a jack and jack stands, 11mm socket, 3/8 ratchet, 15mm socket, 18mm socket, 19mm socket, 21mm socket, 22mm socket, 28mm socket, 1/2-inch ratchet, 11mm wrench, 13mm wrench, 11/16 wrench, 21mm wrench, and a cutoff wheel. To install these upper control arms, we need to remove the upper control arm and the strut. We're going to start off by removing the 3 top nuts on the strut. We're going to remove these nuts with an 11/16 wrench. Remove your ABS wire from the control arm, and then disconnect it up top. Remove the nut on the upper ball joint with an 18mm socket. Before you remove the nut completely, hit the spindle with a hammer to dislodge the ball joint. Now that the ball joint is loose, you can remove the nut. Remove the bottom strut bolts with a 15mm socket. Remove the tie rod. Loosen the tie rod, but don't completely remove the nut just yet. Take a hammer and hit the spindle to release the tie rod. Remove the strut. Use a 21mm socket and wrench to remove the nut and bolt on the upper control arm. Before you remove the bolt, mark it so you know where your alignment will be when you reinstall these bolts. Remove the bolts. Remove the arm. Okay, so our control arm needs a little bit of assembling. We're going to install these provided bushings into the arm. Once the bushings are installed, put a bunch of grease inside the bushings, and then spread it around. Then install the sleeve. Put a little bit of grease on the face of the bushing too. Assemble the pin into the Uniball. Now that it's assembled, we can go back to working on the truck. Before the Fabtech controller can be installed, we need to remove this bump stop right here. We're going to take our cutoff wheel and cut it right off. We put a little paint on the metal that we just grinded so the metal's not exposed, and now we can install our new control arm. Install the original hardware. We're not going to tighten these nuts and bolts just yet. We're going to install the strut first. Reinstall your hardware on top of the strut. All 3 nuts and washers. Install your lower strut bolts. Reconnect the tie rod. So you can see with the Fabtech upper control arm, by removing this bump stop, you have a lot more range of motion with this. So when we go to install this into the spindle, it's going to be a lot easier than the factory one. Just like that. Install the washer and nut. Tighten it down with a 19mm socket and a 13mm wrench. Tighten the tie rod. Make sure your paint marks are lined up and tighten down the upper bolt and nut. Torque the upper control arm bolts to 100 foot-pounds. Torque the upper control arm bolts to 100 foot-pounds. Torque the bottom nut on the uniball to 90 foot-pounds. Put some thread locker on the threads of the upper uniball, then torque the nut to 250 foot-pounds. Use the supplied hardware and attach your ABS line to the upper control arm. Tighten the nut and bolt with an 11mm socket and wrench. Plug in your ABS wire, and your installation is complete. Okay, we got our Fabtech upper control arms installed. They're definitely going to help us get the most out of our lift kit. They're going to give us a lot more travel, and they were a lot easier to install in this lift kit than the factory arms. Installation should only take you about 2 hours, and before you know it, you'll be heading off road.